Welcome to Interplay Conversations in Music. I'm Michael Shapiro, your host, and this edition is with a very special guest, Sara Karloff, daughter of you-know-who. Welcome to Interplay, Sara.
Thank you very much for having me.
I'm so happy to be with you again. As I've mentioned to you on several occasions, my score to the great classic film Frankenstein, directed in 1931 by James Whale and starring Colin Clive and your father, Boris
Yes.
Karloff, has been produced now over 60 times worldwide in one of its 4 versions, all published by Universal Edition in Vienna, Universal Edition, no relation to the studios. Now, we all know that the original film was a talkie, but for technical reasons, it did not have a through composed film score. So in 2002, I wrote one to accompany the original film, and it was originally done for chamber orchestra. And it was premiered at the Film Society of Lincoln Center's Jacob Burns Film Center. And since then, the work has garnered 3 more versions, in addition to the chamber orchestra version, a full orchestra version, a wind ensemble version, and the new opera version, which recently sold out the Los Angeles Opera and the Atlanta Opera. All 4 versions are published by Universal Edition in Vienna. So, Sara, going back to your childhood, which everybody wants to know about, you were raised by the most famous of all horror film stars. Were your friends scared of your father?
Heavens no.
And what
My
was he
father
like?
was my father was the antithesis of the roles he played. He was an English gentleman. He was very funny. He was very soft-spoken.
Mhm.
He was very kind. He was just could not have been more different than the roles he played. He did 20 some odd children's recordings, Hans Christian Andersen, Rudyard Kipling, Just So Stories, all sorts of wonderful children's albums. He was on Broadway in Peter Pan, hardly a monster, although he did play Captain Hook.
That's right.
Um, Children love to come backstage during that play and try on his hook. Um, when he was in Frankenstein, which, by the way, was before I was born. Thank you very much. He said that children got it. They understood that the monster or the creature was the victim and not the perpetrator,
That's right.
and that all the mail he got during those years uh, was from all the mail he got from children um, verified that they were not afraid of the creature. They understood him. They felt sorry for him. And throughout the years that I have been working to protect and really to extend my father's legacy,
Mhm.
that's what I also have understood from fans. The children are not afraid. They understood that the creature was the victim. And so, no, the longest answer and to your very short question was no. My childhood friends were in love with my father, as were all his fans later years.
Now, I told you too at one point that I wrote to him in the early 60s when I was 10 years old, when he was in Thriller on TV. And I sent it to Boris Karloff, Hollywood, California, saying, Dear Mr. Karloff, I'm 10 years old. I love Thriller. You're a thriller. Can I have your autograph? And he sent it back. Somehow the post office got it to his house. And I have the envelope and I have the 2 photographs, one of him as he was then, signed by him. And the other one he must have gotten out of a box because it was a little wrinkled. The monster. What a person he was.
He was indeed.
Did he ever regret being typecast? Or was he?
Um, no and yes. He said that I've heard him in interviews say that any actor who is lucky enough to be typecast is a very lucky actor. He said, and most actors are indeed typecast in one way or another. If you're a, a dancing actor, if you're a romantic actor, if you're a comedian, no matter what you do in the theater or in film, you are in one way or another typecast. He
Mhm.
said it was his bread and butter, although his career was very, very broad. He did comedy, he did Broadway, he did much more than just Frankenstein and the
Of course.
Mummy, which of course were his two iconic roles.
That's right.
But no, he was grateful for being typecast. And he really felt that he was very lucky to be so.
People don't know that before the 1931 breakout role of the monster in Frankenstein, he had been in dozens of films.
Frankenstein was his 81st film.
That's right.
And he said hardly anyone saw the first 80.
And I understand that he was not invited to the opening to which Colin Clive was invited because no one knew who he was.
That's right. My father was not invited to the premiere. And of course, Colin Clive was intended to be the star of the film.
That's right.
And it was everybody's surprise that the creature or the monster turned out to be the star. And of course, nobody knew what my father looked like behind all that magnificent
Oh,
makeup of
Jack
Jack
Pierce.
Pierce's.
Oh,
And so when he hadn't seen the film in its entirety, of course, because he was busy getting the makeup removed when they would run the daily shots. So he hadn't seen it, and um, while it was, of course, running it all over the country, my mother and he went up to San Francisco and it was playing there. And my mother was a graduate of UC Berkeley. And so they were meeting a friend of sorority sister of my mother's up there at the time.
mhm.
And my mother's name was Dorothy and her nickname was Dot. And so they walked into this theater, of course, unrecognized. And they sat there, and when the scene played, when my father turns around in the doorway,
Mhm.
her sorority sister, my mother's sorority sister, screamed out, "Oh my God, Dot, how could you possibly live with such a creature?" Whereupon they were escorted out of the theater. So even then, he didn't get a chance to see the whole film. And because, of course, nobody knew who he was when he was escorted out of the theater.
Here's the amazing thing for this musician. So I think of sound. This is a man in this sound film who only makes a few groaning noises, but
Correct?
had the most magnificent voice.
Yes,
I mean, his
yes,
voice was unlike anyone else, and to this day, everyone knows the sound of Boris Karloff.
that's
He was
right.
an exquisite speaker, so musical. I'm curious about one thing. You know, Lennon Moulton, the critic, wrote in his book about film that the original Frankenstein, 1931, lacked a film score and therefore was creaky. Do you agree?
Well, I'm not quite sure what creaky means, or
Well,
what Lennon
that's
meant.
why I wrote a film score, which has gone on
I know,
for
and
almost 7 dozen performances. It's crazy.
I know, and I'm so anxious to see it.
We'll be there together. See, this
Good,
is
I
the
hope
thing I
so.
want to tell all of our fans of Universal Edition, that in future performances, Sarah's going to accompany me. We're going to do a pre-opera or pre-movie or whatever the version we use. We'll do a pre-talk so we can enjoy all this great stuff about our beloved Boris Karloff. What do you think is, you spoke about it a little at the beginning about children's responses, but what do you think is the essential message of the 1931 Frankenstein, and why would it present for this opera composer a challenge?
No, I think there are a lot of messages in this film. Kindness over viciousness or
Hmm.
cruelty.
Yeah.
Um, but I think the biggest message is man playing God
Right.
is a mistake.
Yeah.
Um, I think that is the biggest message from the film.
Hmm.
Um, the one that one carries away from after seeing the film. But I think there are individual messages that people carry away, personal messages, love messages, fear messages. I've been asked why people enjoy being frightened, and I'm still struggling with an answer to that question. Um, I don't have an answer to that, but I think that's one of the messages that this film asks of people. Why do you enjoy being frightened? And this, in part, is a frightening film, a frightening concept of man playing God. Um, why do people enjoy this?
Well,
And it is a huge question to be answered.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, it's a gem of a time to be together. I must thank you, Sarah, so much for joining me on Interplay.
Well, I look forward to doing this in person.
We look forward to it, and with Universal Edition at our side, we will make it happen.
Good. I look forward to it. And thank you for having me on.
Of course, Sarah, thank you for joining us. This is Michael Shapiro signing off as your host of Interplay Conversations and Music.